Hey everyone, this is Mr. Thacker. Today we will be looking at oblique sketching. So I'm going to demonstrate some examples of sketching an oblique. So on this particular sheet we're going to do problem 1 and 2. Okay, so from the same multi-view sheet that we've been using to create isometrics, we're going to create problems 1 and 2. Now, 1 I'm going to leave to you guys to create. However, I will do problem number 2, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it in both versions or both types of obliques. So there are 2 types of obliques, as you guys learned today, and that is cavalier and cabinet. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is to find out the dimensions of the object. Well, since we've already created these in isometric, we've got that information, and you should also for this one. Okay, be sure to write it up here where it's easily accessible near the multi-view of the object. So first thing I want to do now that I've gotten, or the next thing I want to do now that I've gotten the dimensions, is to lay out my axes. Okay, so before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and label where I want these drawings. Okay, remember we work from left to right, and then from top to bottom, left to right. Okay, so in this first example, I'm going to create, and you want to letter this in there, cavalier oblique. Okay, so we're going to write cavalier, and then we're going to put in there O1. Okay, so that's where we're going to put our cavalier for O1. And then on the right side, we're going to do a cabinet oblique version of O1. O meaning oblique. All right, and in the next 2 blocks, cavalier of O2 and cabinet of O2. Now you can letter this after doing the drawing. However, it's easy to forget lettering it once the drawing is done. So I would do that in front. And I would be remiss to remind you, always make sure that you claim your work. So this is where you want to letter your name to claim your work. All right. Okay, and put in the date. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into cavalier O2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the axes. If you remember, everything on the front is true shape and size, meaning that it does not. It is flat. It is flat just like the multi-view, pretty much, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and lay out the x-axis. It is horizontal. The y-axis is vertical, as it was in the isometric. And the angle, as you guys remember, the receding angle is typically at 45 degrees, okay? So you have 45-degree angled lines, all right, to assist you with that, okay? So now that we've got the dimensions already worked out, we can go ahead and step off those dimensions. So it's kind of hard on your eyes counting these blocks. So I'm just going to double check myself and lay off 10 for the width, 6 for the height, and then 4. And what I'm counting here, you can either count it one of 2 ways. You can count the vertical grid lines or the horizontal grid lines. It really doesn't matter because they intersect in the same place. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and so the depth is 4. All right, so what I want to do, this is the bottom edge, this is the right edge. I want to come in and create the left edge, the top edge, and right there's my front view boxed in 2 dimensions. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and apply the 3rd dimension. I've already got one of the edges going back. I want to create the other edges going back to give it depth, okay? And we know that they should go back 4 because that's what's been measured on the z-axis. All right. Okay, and so there is my object laid out as in the box method, okay? So the next step is to establish the shape. Well, if we look at number 2, just like in the isometric example, the shape is the rectangular prism. We already have that. So we will move on from that step to step number 3, which is to add details, okay? So in adding details, we talked about this detail here, this rectangular prism, smaller rectangular prism being the detail. And then we've got a larger rectangular prism behind it. How far behind it? Well, 2 blocks. So I'm going to start with this one. It is 5 wide by 4 in height and 2 deep. So I'm going to go 5 from the lower left corner, which is where it is positioned. And then from that same corner, measure off 4, make a horizontal line, make a vertical line. And right there it is laid out in 2D. So next I want to give it depth. So from each of its corners, I'm going to just bring lines back. Okay. Now the only corner I'm not going to bring a line back is this corner, because we wouldn't be able to see that reality. Okay. So we know it has a depth of 2, so I'll count back 2 blocks, and at that point just draw a vertical line for the back edge. That's the front edge. There's the back edge. So you can see the right side. You can also see the top, and it happens to coincidentally match up with the top edge of my box. That's coincidence, so don't read into that. That's always going to happen, okay? So from here, we can work from this point and this point. As we talked about with regards to the isometric, you can see where I've marked those previously from that point and that point, so that we can draw this line and bring it on around and connect back, or vice versa. Okay, and you can see where those points are in the top view. So I'm going to be consistent and just draw parallel to X where it meets this outside edge. I know that that line turns and goes vertically for the right edge of the box, and then I can create the top front edge of that rectangular prism, and then where it intersects this point, drop it straight down. And guys, it's that simple. Okay, obliques are tremendously easy. They are the easiest of the pictorial sketches. Okay, a bit more easy than the isometrics. So I've created my details. Now my next step is just to darken the object. Keep in mind this is a Cavalier oblique. Be careful to pay attention where you're darkening, especially if you use the technique that I'm showing you, which is to just darken all of the ones in the same direction. Okay, and then remember to focus on your endpoint. It'll be a whole lot easier. Where I make my mistakes is when I choose not to focus on the endpoint. Okay, and that's it. That's your Cavalier oblique for for O2. Okay, problem number 2. A little bit off the grid line right there. Okay, so watch out for that. That would be a mistake. All right, moving on to cabinet O2. Okay, so just taking the same information, want to lay out my axes. All right, and this time the difference is, as you know, a Cavalier oblique, we don't change anything about the dimensions. Okay, they are as we counted them or measured them off to be. However, in the cabinet oblique, we take half the depth. Okay, so the width is still the same. All right, so count off your 10 blocks. So, and count off your height, which is 6 blocks. And then for the depth, what we want to do is go half of the depth. And the depth was 4, so we're just going to go up 2 blocks and make a mark. All right, and that's going to be our box. So I'm going to create my left edge opposite my right, and my top opposite my bottom. and then take all my corners back. Okay, and we've already measured off the depth, so all we've got to do is create the back edge 2 blocks back. Okay, and right there is our box. Okay, there's our box. So, sorry I didn't zoom in earlier so that you guys could see better. All right, so now I'm ready to go to my next step. So box method, my next step is step number 2, which is to establish the shape. And just like earlier, if we look back at our sheet, not that we need to, but if we look back at our sheet, right there's our detail. And so measure over 5 and measure up 4 to create my detail. Okay, and we want to give it depth, so I just take lines backwards from the corners, okay, except for my lower left-hand corner because I won't see it. This is a solid object, all right? Now, the difference here, remember, is that our cabinet oblique uses half depth. So, if the depth of our detail here is 2, then if we take half of that, it will be 1, okay? And you got to trust that reality, and it will work itself out. So you can see that same thing here in the right side view. So the depth is 1. So go back 1 block, make a mark, and draw your line for the back edge of that detail. Okay, and this time it does not hit this top edge of our box. Okay, so like I said, that was coincidence before. So we can either go from this point here or this point here. I'm going to be consistent again and drag that over to the right edge, right bottom edge, and then bring it straight up to create the front right edge, and then likewise bring this line over there, and as it meets here, drop it straight down, and it's that simple, y'all. It's that simple. So you may get lost in the lines a little bit, especially since we've gone half depth, but let me go ahead and create this for you guys. I'll go ahead and create the details so you can see how that pops out. Now, if it is coming outside of your box, that's an issue, okay? Watch out for that. It should be, the whole object should be within your box. Anything outside of your box would be a mistake. Okay, anything that's dark. So there's the detail. Notice it's within the box. I'm going to go ahead and darken up the other rectangular prism. And there it is, okay? So now you can see, let me zoom back out for you guys. Now you can see an example of the cavalier example and the cabinet example. And according to what we've talked about, the cavalier example is more realistic. And you can kind of see that if you look at this object. It definitely looks more like this example, the cabinet example, than it does the cavalier example, okay? It looks more thin. The proportions look more correct for the cabinet example. So I prefer this method when I'm doing my drawings just because it does look more realistic, okay? It's still not the way our eye sees things, but it's you know, it's not bad. And so the last thing that I would do is come in and render. So I will render one for you guys. So I'll render the cabinet, okay? And so I'll go with this shade here. Let's bring it back in so we can see this a little bit. Again, you know, usually I'll kind of go with the angle of that surface. Now we could, I've been saying, hey, you can use 3 different colors, so maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll just use 3 different colors to communicate this object. That's harder to do when you've got curves and angled surfaces. So watch out for that. Let me do this one vertically. So I'll just use 3 different colors just to show the different sides. And I'll do that on the problem sheet too, so you can see how they match up. Okay, and for the last one, let's see, yeah, I'll do it this way. Right, and okay, and so that's what that looks like in 3 different colors. Certainly you could do that, and that looks pretty cool. It's just an alternative to using the different shades as we did in isometric. Let me do that also on our multi-view. So if we go back into the multi-view, then we can match those up. So I've got the blue, so I'll just shade this front because the whole front is shaded blue. Okay, and the right side is shaded kind of a rose pinkish color. All right, and then the top is shaded in an orange shade. All right, and so there you can see the correlation between the multi-view, let me put it right under it, the multi-view and the cabinet oblique, okay? Well, I hope that gets you guys moving in the right direction. Best wishes. Take care.